What's up, degenerates? We're back. This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta95 on Twitter. V, we're already off to a better start than last week because I didn't mess up the intro. How are you doing tonight? How are you living?
Doing good. Can't complain. Looking forward to another phenomenal weekend of football. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, it should be a good one. We had a pretty good game to start off Thursday. Well, it was okay. It had some points flying. There was some tension there at the end. Ultimately, decent game so far, especially, the traditional Thursday games, the way they go. And then we have a pretty good slate on the books. I really can't wait to break it down. I think we have a good read on this one. There's a lot of crazy games. There's a ton of home dogs this week, which we're going to break into. 9 of the 14 games this week are home underdogs, which is interesting. We also have a London game on the slate. So we got a good variety that we're going to break into, give you guys something in every window of the slate. But business as usual. First off, we are starting with the breakdown of Thursday night. San Francisco went into Seattle, took home the win, 36-24. They went ahead and covered on the road, -3.5. Game total on this one, 48.5. And they did go over that one with 60 total points. This actually also ended up being San Francisco's first road cover of the year. So a pretty good draw for them. Biggest takeaways in this one, San Francisco was better in the red zone, finding a few scores. Their issue so far this year has been that they're really, really efficient in between the 20s. And then once they get into the red zone, they kind of clam up. They don't come away with as many touchdowns as you would like. They kind of bucked that trend this week. I think they had 3 red zone scores. Jordan Mason had a really good game before he went down, 8.1 yards per carry. But then Isaac Guerendo, probably butchered that horrendously, but Isaac Guerendo, 9.9 yards per carry coming in relief. So even though they didn't get Jordan Mason, they're on their third back with CMC still out. That's still really good production for them. And one of their best defensive games of the year. A couple of picks, 31 total pressures, 5 quarterback hits. Geno was under fire for sure. And that really didn't help them with their slow start. They struggled 16-3 in the first half. Just way too slow. Geno inefficient. The running game was absent. I think they had 52 total yards. So on the ground, and that's not really that great. And then the guy that I was targeting to get a nice little over this week, I thought he was going to get off the schneid against San Fran. DK Metcalf, 12 targets, only 3 receptions. So it didn't quite work out as I had thought. What did you make of this one, though?
Yeah, this is a nice bounce back game for the 49ers who had a tough loss last week against Arizona. Despite all the injuries that they're dealing with offensively, whether, it's McCaffrey or Debo who missed a couple of games, Kittle missed a little time, whatever it is, they've had a little bit of a rough stretch to start the season, but you can see based on last night, this is still an extremely talented team. And then if you're going to have Brock Purdy playing as well as he did yesterday, and he has, frankly, throughout the majority of the season, there's a reason why they were favored to come out of the NFC and why they should still be, the favorites coming out despite only being 500 right now. This is just a super efficient team, well coached, amazing, offensive playbook that they run. That's very hard to stop. You can put in, third string rookies, I think, and still have phenomenal outings. That's just how, well oiled this team is. So, understanding that there was some concern with San Francisco after a couple, strange losses to start the year, but, they're right on track. They're good. This is still going to be a very good team. They still have, they have a difficult schedule coming up. They still have a lot of good teams to play, but no concerns with them going forward. Seattle, on the other hand, pretty concerning and pretty disappointed with what we've seen over the last 3 weeks. This is a team, I was definitely excited to watch, and I was really mainly excited to watch this defense because I thought they could be really, really good. I thought they could be a top 10 unit, and, I understand that they have quite a few injuries, but it's been tough to watch them the last 3 weeks. Like, they cannot stop anything. It's one thing to get blown out by Detroit. That happens to a lot of teams, but to get boat raced by Daniel Jones and the Giants last week was just inexcusable. And then, having another tough performance last night at home is just, hopefully they can get healthy. Hopefully they can turn around. It's still early and they're still tied for first in that division, but, would like to see quite a bit more from their defense going forward.
Yeah, and one of the issues has been that they were very, very productive pass rushing, that being Seattle. Early in
Mm-hmm.
the season, Mike McDonald had those guys really pushing. And like you said, some of the injuries have set them back just a little bit, but it's a little bit of combination of both. Yes, having key players being hurt and missing games is definitely difficult, but we're also looking at two situations where the defense really just didn't show up as well as they have the first couple weeks, particularly pass rushing, and then the offense just goes absent for long periods of time, and we weren't super worried about it coming out of last week. We thought, hey, maybe they can get it back. That is a tough look, but now 2 weeks in a row, we're starting to get a trend here. The offense is having some trouble. Where they were running the ball decently well and then just go absolutely absent from the running game. Can't get anything going passing, really got beat up in pass pro. So those are things that are troubling for them moving forward, and we'll definitely have to see how they come out of this one, because
Yeah.
they have some tough games to come to head. But I
Yeah,
forgot to turn
for
on my
sure.
light. There we go. That's what I forgot. I told you, V, there was going to be something I forgot, and it was my light. There we go. But that's it for the Thursday night game. Now we're going to get into our slate on the week, and it's actually really interesting. We have a lot of the similar reads here, but the first game we're starting out with is the London game. Jacksonville heads to their home away from home. And how do they they always, I feel like they always get away status for these London games. And it's like, how do you luck out by playing a game in a stadium that you're very familiar with, and you also get the away status? So Jacksonville heading into, I think they're in Tottenham.
On Stadium, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're in Tottenham, taking on the Bears. The Bears been
Yeah.
playing decently well. They're coming off one of their best games of the year. And surprise, surprise, they're kind of killers against the spread. 3-1-1, doing pretty well. 36-10 last week versus Carolina. Like I said, one of their best performances of the year. Offensively, defensively, they really looked like they were clicking. And that's a huge thing for their offense, because offensive production was pretty hard for them to come by this year. Jacksonville, though, also, right after we're kind of throwing shots at Doug Peterson about losing the locker room, and, Trevor Lawrence threw a couple of throws at the first half that I was like, yep, Trevor's throwing some balls like he wants a new head coach by the time they get out of this one. But lo and behold, they really picked it up, and Trevor ended up having his best game. Fed Brian Thomas was really well. Tank Bigsby absolutely gashed Indy. So all around pretty good game for them. V, which way are you leaning in this one?
Yeah, looking to go 2 for 2 on our London picks. We hit Minnesota against the spread last week, thankfully, and we're going to try to make it 2 for 2. I'm taking Chicago -2 in this game. I just think Chicago is the better team overall, and they're a team that's improving every single week, which is what you want to see, especially with a very young team like Chicago is, that has some new pieces on offense, both on the field and in terms of play callers. So this is exactly what you want to be seeing from that team. They started off the season, pretty much in the bottom 3, bottom 5 in a lot of offensive scoring categories. They moved up to 16th in points per game, which is not great, but anybody who's a Chicago fan knows being even average is an accomplishment for that offense. So definitely moving in the right direction. Caleb just continues to look better and better, getting more comfortable in that offense. A lot of people want to look at the touchdowns or the passing yards. Key for me, 0 turnovers in the last 2 games, doing a really good job, just not even putting the ball anywhere close to harm's way, just taking what's there, extending plays if he has to. So that's been really cool to see. A big benefit for their offense has been the improvement of the rushing game. It was completely non-existent over the first 3 games, but in the last 2 games, they've rushed for at least 128 rushing yards. So seeing a lot of improvement on that front. And now they're going up against the Jacksonville defense that is just really not good right now. They're allowing the 3rd most points per game in the NFL. They've overtaken the Ravens for allowing the most passing yards per game. Joe Flacco just went off in that second half against them. They only have 2 takeaways on the season, and one of them was on special teams. So this defense, just by itself, has 1 takeaway on the season. That's really bad. They have 0 interceptions, so they just really can't do anything in pass defense. Tyson Campbell, who's probably their best secondary player, is still out. He was activated off the IR, allowed to practice, but he has already been ruled out for this week. So hopefully he'll return next week. So I think Chicago's offense is going to do quite well in this game. On the flip side, Jacksonville's offense did finally look like what we were kind of expecting going into the season last week. They dropped 34 on Indy. But the question is going to be how much of that is them turning a corner versus how much of this is against a not so great Indy defense. Whereas now they're going against a Chicago defense that is quite good. They're amongst the tops in a lot of different categories. They're allowing 17 points per game this season. You have to go back to last November to see when was the last time they gave up more than 21 points in a game. That's how good they've been, and that's how long they've been good. They have not allowed a passing touchdown since week 2. So the last 3 games, no team has scored a passing touchdown on them. They've only given up 2 all season, so it could be an interesting day for Trevor Lawrence. They do have a couple injuries in their secondary. Jaquan Brisker is ruled out with a concussion, and then Tyreek Stevenson is listed as doubtful after getting a calf injury in practice yesterday. So down a couple starters, that'll be interesting to see, but overall they still have a lot of talent. The one area where Chicago's defense does struggle is against the run. They've allowed 120 rushing yards in 4 of the 5 games, and it's going to be really interesting to see what Jacksonville does with Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, because I think Peterson is alluding to Etienne still being their lead guy, but after seeing what Bigsby did last week, like how do you not give that guy more touches? Like he is a monster. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Key thing I'm looking at in this game is both of the pass rushes against the opposing teams. Jacksonville, even though their defense has not been great, the one bright spot has been Trayvon Walker and Joshua Hines-Allen. They have 7 sacks on the season, so they've looked really good. Trayvon Walker had 3 last week. He was a monster. And the Bears' tackles on offense have been not great, so it's going to be interesting to watch. On the flip side, Trevor Lawrence was sacked 11 times over the first 3 games, but only once in the last 2 games. So if they can continue to keep him protected, he could have a nice day. But again, the Chicago defense is really good. That defensive line is performing very well. So I think they'll be able to get home a couple times. So overall, I think Chicago's a better team and should be able to win this game outright.
Yeah, the defense is definitely a big crux here, especially for the Bears, where they've been playing decently well. Down a couple starters, it's definitely hurts, especially in the secondary when Trevor Lawrence has picked it up and they have protected a little bit better. I would expect, Matt Eberflus to throw in some of those blitzes, really keep Trevor guessing. And, it remains to be said because this game is in London and traditionally the Jags have done decently well in London. I think that Trevor was 2-1 against the spread, 3-1. I can't remember exactly, but decently well in London. But we have to also talk about what the Bears have done against the spread as favorites. Like these 3 wins that they have this year against the spread come as favorites, and they've been favored in their last 2 games. Granted, it comes against a Rams team that's pretty hobbled, and they in Chicago being at home, as well as another game last week against Carolina, another one at home. So you want to see how they're going to travel because they're a little bit more spotty traveling, 0-2. But that came against the Texans in Houston. Indy, Indy's just been such a weird, volatile team. They're up, they're down, they're injured. It's weird, a really weird team to peg down right now. But overall, really good trends for them to go into this one. So I definitely like where your head's at. You took them at, I think, -2. This one keeps moving around. So make sure you guys are shopping for this one. It looks like you can get it as low as -1 over at Caesars, according to our friends over at Betting Pro. So definitely go check that out, you guys. So the next game we have on the list in the early slate here after the London game, this one is one that I'm liking, and it kind of goes against some of the trends that I usually fall into. So you guys will have to bear with me on this one. But we have Houston heading into New England. They are laying 6.5 points. Game total for this one, roughly about 38 points. But Houston's coming off a pretty big win last week against Buffalo, 23-20. It's their first cover of the year, B. Really? They are 1-4 against the spread. It's not looking good. So New England, though, is not much better against the spread, and they keep getting points at home. So I'm like, not really sure what to make of both of those trends. Somebody has to cover this game, you guys. So New England is 1-3-1 against the spread, 3 straight losses against the spread. That is just not very good. Like I said, somebody does have to cover this one, and I'm just going to go ahead and take the team that just covered against a really good team in Buffalo. I know that they've just dropped a couple of games. They're still really talented. They play great football. And one of the big crux here is that New England is starting Drake May. And this is something that you talk about a lot, V, is that first game, that rookie first game, or the first game for rookie passers is always a struggle. And this one's just not going to look very good. This is not a great situation for Drake May to be stepping into. And the reason being is that their protection is still very, very porous. 48.9% pressure rate allowed. That's the worst in the NFL. 18.1% knockdown rate allowed. That's also the worst in the NFL. And that one is even a little bit more alarming than just the pressure rate, because when you're putting the quarterback on the ground, especially a young quarterback, that can quickly go sideways as they lose confidence with every single hit. We saw it when we watched Caleb Williams really take a beating early on, and he even talked about, I'm going to be sore. He was really having a tough time out there, quote unquote, seeing ghosts, things like that. And this is going to be an issue when you talk about what Houston possesses, especially on the edge. These Houston edge defenders are absolutely going to eat up this offensive line. Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, 42 combined pressures, and they have just been fantastic, especially in recent weeks. I would expect them to continue to do really well. Now, the entire defense isn't exactly upper echelon in generating pressure this year, but they are doing decently well in win rate, and they are going to, I think, take a step forward in this one. And when you have that, that's going to mean that they're going to give the ball back to CJ Stroud. And while, a touchdown favorite on the road is a little bit daunting, I think that this is a situation where Houston is playing really good football. CJ Stroud is really well coached. They're really performing well as an offense. I know that they're not going to have Nico Collins this week. I'm not overly worried about that because I still think they have other weapons that they can get the ball to. Nico Collins is an amazing receiver. They definitely will miss him, but I just don't think it's going to be. Nico Collins is what allows them to win by 17 and not 10, which they're going to win roughly this one by, I would expect. Yeah. So even on the road, I'm taking Houston. I think it's a pretty safe bet here, especially if you can get it at the 6.5. If you're kind of towards the 7, I'm not like loving it quite as much, but 6.5, I'm full in on. V, are you making anything out of this game, or what are you seeing in this one?
Yeah, I think that definitely the key in this one is going to be, Texans defense versus Drake May. It's going to be a tough day for him. I think it's going to be a tough debut, not the opponent you necessarily want to see on the schedule when you're making your first start. We saw what they did to Caleb Williams, like you said. We also saw what they did to Josh Allen last week. Dude was 9 for 30 passing. Like, this is one of the best quarterbacks in the game right now, and you made him look like a complete scrub. What are you going to do against a rookie making his first start in the league? Like, tough situation. Interesting to see how he'll play. He does have some mobility that we don't see out of Jacoby Brissett, so maybe he can alleviate some of the protection issues that they're having. But overall, it's I don't think it's going to go great. Ramondre Stevenson has already been ruled out for this game. Interesting situation with him last week where he came in as not the starter, but he still had a ton of carries and had a great touchdown and still performed very well. So he would have been a very useful guy to have for Drake May. So without that extra piece, it's going to be even harder for that offense. This is not going to be a pretty game on either side. I also don't necessarily think Houston's offense is going to be terrific. I think Nico Collins is phenomenal, and losing him is going to be tough. Christian Gonzalez for New England is, one of the best cornerbacks in the game that nobody is really talking about right now. We were hyping him up early last season, and he got hurt, and it seems like people forgot about him, but he's been really good again to start this season. So if he can, lock down one of the other receivers on Houston, whether it's Stephon Diggs or Tank Dell, now you're limiting your options quite a bit for Houston. There's not as many guys to throw to. Joe Mixon is still out, so it's going to be another Cam Akers game. I think overall this is going to be an ugly, sloppy game that's not going to be super fun to watch. So I'm actually going to be targeting the under in this game. That's going to be on my card this week, 37.5. I think it's just going to be a very low scoring, not a lot going on type of game for this one.
Yeah, I definitely can see that being the case too, for sure. One of the big things I've definitely seen, especially when you talk about the New England defense, is that sometimes their coverages just look so vanilla. It's tough to really understand how a Bill Belichick disciple runs these very generic coverages on the back end a lot. And unfortunately, also for New England, they're going to be without their safety. Why am I?
Is it Kyle Duggar?
Jabril Peppers.
Oh, Jabril Peppers. Yeah, he was
Yes,
put on the
they're going to be
commissioner's list this week.
Yes, he
Yeah.
was put on the commissioner's exempt. I don't know why I brain farted Jabril Peppers' name. I was trying to think of, for some reason, all of the safeties of Patriots lore flooded through my
Yeah.
head at 1 minute. I went through like 12 years of
Went through like
New
Rodney
England
Harrison and
safeties.
McCourty
Yeah,
twins. Who am I
before
supposed to
I
pick?
got to Jabril. Yeah, so they will be without him this week. That might be a detriment to them. But yeah, so this is going to be another interesting one. Might not see this one on Red Zone very much, though. So I definitely agree with you there. The next game we have on the list, though, what a transition. You're going to see on Red Zone a lot. You're going to see
the only game you're going to see.
This is the only game you're going to see on Red Zone. It's going to be on Red Zone every 30 seconds. You're going to feel like you watched the entire game. We have Washington heading into Baltimore to take on the Ravens. The Ravens this one, 6.5 point favorites. Game total for this about 51 and a half points. I know that we're both liking the over in this one. V, break this one down. What are you seeing in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's pretty simple. These are the top 2 scoring offenses in the NFL right now. They're literally 1 and 2 right now. They both rank top 10 in drives that end in points. They rank in the bottom 10 in turnovers. These are just 2 very, very efficient offenses where whenever they get the ball, more likely than not, they're going to score points, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown. And, honestly, it's been touchdowns more often than field goals, too. So these are just 2 teams that really get after it offensively. Baltimore's defense just got absolutely torched last week by Joe Burrow and the Bengals. He had 5 passing touchdowns. This Bengals secondary is allowing 280 passing yards per game right now. So I have no concerns with what Jaden Daniels is going to be able to continue to do in this game. And then I know Washington's defense, just looking at the numbers, has been quite impressive the last 2 weeks. They allowed 14 to Arizona and then 13 last week to Cleveland. But, again, that was Deshaun Watson. He's not very good. This is a completely different beast in Baltimore. And I think what we're going to see is similar to what we saw in week 1, where Tampa Bay kind of had their way against this defense. I think that's what we're going to see with Baltimore. And this game is going to be a tough task for Washington's young defense. But yeah, overall, I just think it's going to be points. I wouldn't be surprised if both teams hit 30 team total in this game. So easy over for me on this one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm on the over as well. 51 and a half is a big number, but I don't think that scares us off with how these teams have played, especially offensively. And like you said, Washington has picked it up a bit on the defensive side of the ball the last couple of weeks. And the Arizona game was actually probably one of the more impressive ones. But when we do talk about, I was also kind of shopping the line here at 7 for Washington. I'm kind of liking it. I'm leaning that way. That might be one to target if you guys are looking for a little extra.
You can get it at 7 for sure.
If you can get it at 7, yeah, I think that's definitely a strong point there. Washington 4-1 against the spread. They're 4 straight against the spread wins. Like you said, 2 of the best offenses in the league, 2 highest EPA per play offenses. The big difference, though, is that Washington is actually their EPA per play rate is almost 60% higher than Baltimore's at 1 and 2. So they are really performing very, very well, even in that regard from the rankings. So 38 points per game over their last 3 for them. And like I said, Baltimore is right there too, 34.7 points per game over their last 3. Both defenses do have some holes, particularly in the secondary. Baltimore just barely survived Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and it wasn't pretty for a little while. And I was hanging on. We were hanging on.
Worried about that. We bought that Baltimore minus the 2.5 last week.
We were holding on, and then they really came through for us at the end. But it was a sweater. It was a nail biter. And like you said, Washington has played better the last 2, but they're still a bottom third in the NFL in defensive EPA per play allowed. I think you're right. We're going to see more of what Tampa was able to do with them, with some good offensive weapons. One of the things that I don't think is talked about enough is Rashad Bateman is getting open a lot, and they don't really get him the ball a ton. But hey, man, when you go back and look over at PFF, we broke down separation rate and things like that, and ability to get off press. And Rashad Bateman's at the top of all of these lists. And I think it kind of sent a shot. There's been more separation numbers and little highlight clips of him, getting open a lot, not getting looks. If they can get some of those looks, I think that it's going to even help this offense even more, where they've already been very efficient. So, when we look at just the overall game total numbers for both of these teams, Baltimore and Washington are both 4-1 on overs this year. And the only under for either of these games over their last 3 was the Baltimore Buffalo game. And it wasn't because Baltimore didn't show up. They scored 35. Yeah. It was because Buffalo didn't show up. And I think that Buffalo, obviously a really good team. We were on them in that game, and I was definitely expecting them to play a better game. I just don't know that you're going to see an inspired defensive performance out of Baltimore after kind of what they were giving up to a really, really good offense.
They'll certainly try, right? It's just how effective are they going to actually
exactly. Exactly. So this is going to be one you're going to see a lot. This is one we're going to be really tapped into. So I can't wait to see it go down. The next game we have on the list here, though, is an interesting one. It's another one of these home dog games. We have Tampa on the road, -3.5 at New Orleans. And Tampa's actually coming off a little bit of extra rest, having last played in Thursday night against Atlanta. And I know they let up a ton of yardage against Kirk O'Banks and the Falcons. But that game wasn't that far off. They played a really good game themselves, at least offensively. And that game really could have swung their way if just a couple of things fell for them. So I'm liking them coming off of extra rest and playing an opponent that is unfortunately also starting a rookie quarterback in their first game. Spencer Rattler is going to be making his first start in this one for Derek Carr, who hurt his back, oblique, something like that. Yeah, the injury report's always very vague, but he kind of like grabbed his midsection there. Definitely sent a worry through everybody right there at the end of their game on Monday night. So, you just have to lean away from these rookie quarterbacks making their debuts, especially when you look at what the Saints are doing right now offensively. They've just hit a brick wall. They just don't have what they were doing. This is the team, V, now that we were talking about early in the year that was like, this might be a really rough go for them. And they fell apart quickly. They looked good. And now we know they have that ceiling and hey, they can make something happen. Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, they're good players. Alvin Kamara, he's had a resurgence, but they tried to run last week, couldn't get anything. Were pretty horrendous throwing the ball. They missed. Chris Olave, I think, I can't even remember. He had a ton of targets, not a ton of catches, because passes just aren't coming in clean right now. They're kind of getting beat up. And a lot of that comes from these injuries on the offensive line. Lucas Patrick is their only really highly graded guy right now. Talisi Fuaga, who started off really good, has kind of fallen off a little bit. They've had Cesar Ruiz. I'm believing he got hurt. He missed the last week, and I believe he's set to miss this week as well. Like I said, Lucas Patrick, he's been missing practice too, but still going out there to play. Like, they have a ton of issues right now up front, and it's kind of having a cascading effect on the entire offense. So I'm leaning away from them. I'm going to go with Tampa, who by and large looks like they have it figured out. There's some issues, especially when teams feel like they can figure out their defense. And that's some questions that they have to ask about what are they running defensively that everybody knows. And I mean, it makes sense. They've been running the same scheme for pretty much every year under Bowles. So it's just like, okay, maybe let's try to flip it up. Maybe let's try to do something different. There are adjustments that can be made to make them look better. But I'm also just interested to see this Lincoln Riley protege matchup square off between Baker, Spencer Rattler. Baker's looked really good, man. Baker has been dealing, and Mike Evans is looking like he's having fun. That's good in a matchup like this with him and Marshawn Lattimore, because everybody wants to watch that. But another matchup that we kind of have to talk about or even like identify that'll be really, really vital if Spencer Rattler and the Saints are going to do absolutely anything in this game. And that's going to be what Chris Olave can do with Zion McCollum, because people don't realize, I don't think, but Zion McCollum is one of the top corners over the first 5 games of the season. He's been playing outstanding. This Tampa Bay secondary, even though they got absolutely gashed against Atlanta, they were playing really well heading into the game. So that's going to be another one to watch for. And a lot of good matchups on the outside. I can't wait to see the sparks fly. I don't know if I can even say the punches thrown, but man, Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore is always fun to watch. Are you seeing anything in this one that I'm not seeing?
Yeah, this one's a little bit of a tough one for me. Getting 3.5 points on the road in a divisional game is something that usually doesn't go super well for the team that's favored by that many points on the road.
True.
But like on the other side, it is Spencer Rattler's first game when we know rookies just don't perform very well in their first starts. Questions for me on this one is just Tampa Bay's defense has been super all over the place so far to start the season. They looked really good against Jaden Daniels, Jared Goff, and Jalen Hurts, but then they couldn't do anything to stop Bo Nix and Kirk Cousins. Like, it's just very hard to pin down with this defense, when they're going to show up and when they're not. Obviously, they still have a ton of injuries, whether it's Antoine Winfield or Kalijah Cansey. Vita Vea has been in and out, stuff like that. So understand that they've had some injuries, but just very, very inconsistent throughout the first 5 weeks of the season. And then, the Saints defense is a little bit up and down too, but over the last 3 games, they also have not allowed a passing touchdown since week 2. Philly couldn't get anything going at all until the fourth quarter of that game in week 3, where Saquon Barkley was able to score a couple times, but Hurts struggled throughout most of that game. They played Atlanta the next week. Atlanta did not score any offensive touchdowns in that game. They had a couple of special teams and defensive touchdowns, but outside of that, Kirk Cousins and the boys couldn't get the ball into the end zone. And then last week, I don't know, the Chiefs put up 26 points, but even Mahomes still didn't look all that great. He didn't have any passing touchdowns. There was just a couple rushing touchdowns for Kansas City. So, I think the Saints defense is okay. They show up from time to time and they can do some things. They still have some players. It's just, again, hard to know when they're going to show up every single week. So I don't know. There's just too many questions for me in this matchup on both sides of the ball. You don't know what you're going to get out of Spencer Rattler. He showed some encouraging things in the preseason, despite being a day 3 pick and somebody who didn't get a lot of buzz after transferring out of Oklahoma in college. So just too many question marks for me to feel comfortable taking any side in this one.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that drew me to this one though is specifically the Chris Godwin effect of what they can do. Because man, Juju had a crazy resurgence against the Saints secondary, and they did well to stick with a guy like Xavier Worthy, who really didn't break loose against them at all. But Travis Kelce ended up having a good game. They really beat up the middle of the field. They're super strong on the outsides and in the perimeter, and feels like deep. They really play sound coverage together. But man, Juju ended up really gashing them open in the middle, and so did Travis Kelce. So I'm thinking that might be hopefully the place that can be the difference maker for Tampa. But I definitely feel what you're saying. The the Tampa Bay secondary is definitely an enigma because they play really, really well at times. But then, I even in a way repressed the Denver game because I lost on that one.
That one is just so hard to comprehend. I think that has to be one of the leaders for the most confusing games of the season so far. Like, what
exactly
happened?
Yeah, 100%. So we definitely have to see what they're gonna do, and I'm hoping that tough break here for Spencer Rattler to start this one. So we're gonna have to see how that one goes. But yeah, I'm definitely still liking it. I would like it more if we were at 3. I'm okay with taking it at 3.5 though. So we're gonna ride there into the later slate. This is actually this is a more packed later slate than usual. We have, I think, 4 games we're targeting in the later slate, which is kind of a lot for us. And I'm pretty sure there's 6 in the late slate, or more than usual.
Like 4 or 5, but I think we
4 or 5. Yeah, we're hitting most of them. Yeah, we're hitting most of them. So that's the moral of the story. And the first one we're hitting, and I love it, V. I love it, is the LA Chargers -3 on the road, heading into Denver to take on the Broncos. And just some housekeeping here with how these teams are doing against the spread. Denver, 4-1 against the spread, one of the best against the spread records in the NFL. They have covered their last 3 at Tampa as 6-point underdogs, at the Jets as 8-point underdogs, and last week against Vegas as 3-point favorites. The Chargers, though, are coming off of a bye, and they covered as road favorites in week 2. That was, I think, their only road favorite game, and that was against Carolina, one of Bryce Young's last games. Joey Bosa 2 DNPs to start the week. I haven't checked on what he did today. Justin Herbert, couple limited practices. I'm sure you'll probably break into the injury report a little bit with your breakdown here. But what are you liking in this one, V?
Yeah, this is a weird line. There's a very real chance this is a trap line that I'm falling into, but just not something I'm going to be able to avoid. And I just have to take your Denver Broncos covering the full 3 at home. Their defense has been really good, man. What can you say? Like, it's been really, really crazy to watch how well they've played defensively. I think we talked maybe last season or the year before that they lost so many pieces defensively, whether they're trades or whatever, and it felt like they were kind of doing a complete teardown. That it kind of seemed like it's going to be a little while before Denver's defense is going to be able to return to the form we saw in the mid 2010s and whatnot. But man, they've been really, really good the last few weeks. They've allowed 18 or fewer points in each of their last 4 games. They're tied for second fewest points allowed per game. They're ranked in the top 10 in fewest passing and rushing yards. They're allowing the 5th lowest passer rating to opposing quarterbacks. They're 3rd in sacks and pressure rate. So they're getting to the quarterback all the time. And when the quarterback even does have a sliver of time, they just don't have anywhere to go with the ball because their secondary is playing unbelievably. Pat Surtain has been phenomenal. I gave him a little gruff after their week 2 game against Pittsburgh. George Pickens didn't have like any sort of remarkable stat line, but it felt like he was dominating Surtain in that game, drawing a couple pass interference calls deep down the field that really turned the tide in that game and helped Pittsburgh win. So, I was thinking, what's going on with him? He's not looking very good right now, but Surtain has been great the last 3 weeks. And then the offense, Bo Nix, I'm still not a believer, but you have to give him credit. He has been getting better recently. He had 4 interceptions in the first 2 games. Since then, in those last 3, 0 turnovers total and 5 total touchdowns. So he's taking care of the ball. He's being way more careful and more efficient offensively. And then on the flip side, like, I just don't trust the Chargers offense. They came out better than I would have thought. I was really, against them in week 1 against the Raiders, and they definitely surprised me. But starting in week 3 and week 4, they kind of turned into what I was expecting. Obviously they had a lot of injuries, but even still, this is just not an offense that has any sort of weapons that you are worried about in any sort of way. They scored 10 points in week 3, 10 points in week 4. And now they're going up against a really, really good Denver defense. First 2 games were against the Raiders and the Panthers. So whatever they did in those 2 games, I think are not representative of what this team actually is. And, I think they're just going to continue to struggle. Herbert was limited in practice this week for a couple of days, but he is off the injury report, so he's a full go. Joe Alt is also off the injury report, so he should be a full go. Alt had a really good first game against the Raiders, but he really struggled in week 3 against Pittsburgh. So, he's a top 5 pick, but, it'll be interesting to see if he can, start improving and start holding down that side of the line, because you're going to need to against the Broncos team. Rashawn Slater is questionable. He was limited all week. They're really going to need him. If he's out, then they're just going to be even tougher for this overall Chargers offense. And then after a really, really good first 2 weeks for J.K. Dobbins, he only has 76 total rushing yards in the second 2 games of the season. So, if they're not going to be able to run the ball, if they're not going to be able to throw the ball, if they're not going to be able to protect Justin Herbert, which is what I'm expecting, not only do I not see them covering the 3, like, how are they winning this game at all? Like, this is not only a Denver +3 pick for me. This is a Denver money line pick. Like, yeah, I just don't see it with this Chargers team. I don't know what they do well right now whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about what Denver's been able to do in the secondary, both of these corners, Pat Surtain and Riley Moss, have just come on very, very strong. And it wasn't pretty at first, because we talked about, especially with Pat Surtain, he was having some pretty tough days out there in coverage, especially for the first 2 weeks, but he's really picked it up, had improved performances every single week. And, another piece that I've been looking at a lot over at PFF is the lockdown rate, which has been really impressive for him, which shows, snaps that aren't necessarily always targeted, where he is still taking in tight coverage. And he's up there now after a couple of really, really good weeks. He's up there in the top 7 of the NFL at lockdown rate. So he's picking it up. And when they're doing that and he's taking balls 100 yards to the house, they become really hard to beat, man. So even when, you have, at the end of the day, it comes down to the turnover rate. when you have Bo Nix not turning over the ball and this defense giving them the ball back, it doesn't really matter who you are.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat you when you're doing that. So I'm right there with you. I think, man, this Chargers team has just been limping along so far, and they're still kind of limping in through this. Even with getting some guys back, you have to expect that not everybody's coming back 100%. And that's alarming when they just had a bye.
Yeah.
Like, they just had their bye. So it only goes up from there. Like, they have to figure it out with the pieces that they have. And they were already fairly limited on offensive weapons, that when you start hurting all these guys, these crucial players, these key players on the defense and up front on this offensive line that is supposed to be kind of the heart of what the Chargers want to do in running the ball, it just makes sense why, a guy like J.K. Dobbins isn't doing very well either in these recent weeks. So I'm definitely with you. I think that this might definitely be a sign where you could go and take the money line for Denver. +3 though. I love it. I think you're absolutely right there. So the next game we have on the list, which is a little bit of a confusing one, seeing both these teams, I was like, why is this game not in the 11 o'clock slate? I would kind of think that they might lean it towards 11 o'clock. It was also listed
West
on
Coast
PFF.
game, like you have to put it in the afternoon slate, just how it goes. I think.
Oh, okay. Now I'm seeing why. I think I was thinking more Pittsburgh was at home at first, and that's why it like threw me off. But anyway, so Pittsburgh heading into Vegas to take on the Raiders, and they are 3-point road favorites here. And V, I'm pretty sure I have to double check. Nope, that wasn't one of your picks, and that wasn't one of my picks on the list. This might be the first week we both didn't take Pittsburgh to cover, even though I still like them to potentially cover here. It's just not my favorite cover of the week. But -3 on the road. Game total for this one, 36.5 points. And you know me, V. When I see a game like this, I see 36.5 points on the line. I'm frothing at the bit. Pittsburgh, 4 unders in the last 5 games, and I'm going with the under as well. The Raiders, they went ahead. They're going to go sit Gardner Minshew. They're going with Aiden O'Connell. Minshew, 2 turnover-worthy plays last week. Vegas has just been willing to live with the turnovers if Gardner Minshew was going to be hitting these throws downfield, and he's just not. That was kind of the choice that they balanced, or that they weighed when they decided who was going to start under center for this team. And Minshew just hasn't been holding up kind of his end of the bargain there. 55% adjusted completion percentage on throws 10 or more yards down the field. That's not great for a guy that's supposed to be the quote unquote gunslinger, that, he might give the ball away in a couple of boneheaded interceptions or a fumble or something, but you're hoping that he's just going to keep chucking it downfield and you're going to come away with more than you don't. That hasn't been the case though. Aiden O'Connell, generally safer with the ball, not really known to press downfield as much, even though he had about 8 yards of average depth per target this last week, which isn't a ton, but is kind of a jump for him. He's going to have issues, though, if he holds the ball and gets off tempo in this one, because the Pittsburgh pass rush is absolutely insane. They are so damn good. They haven't racked up a ton of pressures in terms of production, only 21st in total pressures, but they have an incredible pass rush win rate, 59.4%. They are literally crushing it. That's second in the NFL, behind a team we're going to talk about a little bit later there, though. Man, I think when we talk about Vegas, we just have to understand that they are not in a good spot right now. They have a ton of issues. They don't really have any weapons offensively. They're not blocking terribly great. And now they're going to a new quarterback. And while Aiden O'Connell might be more protective over the football, might be the nice way to put it, he's really not the guy that's going to push the ball downfield and really put up points for this team. And I'm not sure that that's what they need right now. So I'm going to lean away from them really getting much of any production here. They've looked pretty bad for the last handful of weeks, and we kind of continue to talk about it. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, they lost a heartbreaker last week. they're not really known as a team that's going to boat race you offensively. Now, Justin Fields, he has been efficient. He has been fine this season. He's fallen off a little bit over the last couple weeks, but these are also the games that he needs to lock in a little bit more for to not give Russell Wilson a shot at this job. There's rumors and reports and things that, Russell might be on the trade block and they might be shopping him and things like that. We can't really put any weight to most of that right now. They have two quarterbacks. They're still trying to figure out who they want to go the rest of the way with. And Justin Fields needs to end up picking it up if he's going to be that guy. So I still don't know that that's going to be enough production to take them over this 36 mark. I see like a 20-10 game here and having 30 total points and having it really not come that close to this total.
Yeah, that might even be generous.
That might even be generous. Exactly. So V, are you seeing anything on this one either?
Yeah, this is just the
ugly game.
Not a fun one at all whatsoever. If this was, Pittsburgh minus 2.5 or something, I would probably be inclined to take them. But after that last second loss last week for both of us, I kind of had to take at least 1 week off from the Steelers. Just brutal way to lose that bet last week on Sunday night, or I guess Monday morning when that game ended. So not super fun. I just don't see anything with this Raiders team. Super disappointing. You said they don't have weapons, but I think they actually do have a lot of fun weapons. They're just not capable of utilizing them. Like a pass catching group of Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers should be incredibly fun for any quarterback and any play caller in the league to have. And these guys are just 100% wasting them. Devontae Adams obviously wants out. He's probably never going to play in a Raiders uniform again. Brock Bowers looks phenomenal. That touchdown he had last week was, out of this world. Great. Easily going to be, the best tight end in the game in the next year or two, especially with some of these older guys retiring. So he's well on his way to do that. But, he's still not going to have a quarterback probably anytime soon to throw him the ball. It's just a tough situation. They can't run the ball. They can't do anything whatsoever. And, shouldn't be overly surprised when you go into the season with Gardner Minshew or and Aiden O'Connell. So, Jalen Milroe, you're probably a Raider next year. Get ready to move to Vegas, start finding some houses. That's what I'm seeing already. It's only October, but that's my projection right now.
Wasn't Mark Davis talking to Shadur at a basketball game or something a little while back?
He was, but I thought Deion said like his kids are not going to Las Vegas.
Deion's like, no,
if you're going to take Shadur, Carson Beck is not looking very good right now. Let's just go ahead and put Jalen in there.
No, I like that. I like that.
And then, and this Pittsburgh offense, should be a lot better, but who knows what's going on with George Pickens. Some of the videos floating around online this week of his route running were not inspiring, so that's tough to see because he's obviously a very fun player when he has it going at 100%. But yeah, very curious to see if this is also going to be Justin Fields, kind of maybe last start this season for Pittsburgh. I don't think that's how it's going to go. Even if they do bring Russell in at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up going back to Justin again at some point. He kind of doing a lot of flip flopping, but Wilson was off the injury report today. He is full go. He is officially the backup. And, if Justin Fields doesn't have I don't know what the baseline needs to be, but if he doesn't hit whatever baseline they need, don't be surprised to see Russell Wilson starting for them next week. So just kind of a mess on both sides. Nothing I really want to touch.
And something that I was also thinking about, it's tough because every time I look over and I feel like I'm watching a Vegas turnover, it's some sort of really heinous throw to Trey Tucker, or just why are we continuing to target Trey Tucker?
He's good. I have actually enjoyed watching him play. That dude's a burner. He can make things happen. I just really think he's not getting. None of these guys are getting the quarterback play they deserve. If you put an even competent guy I don't know, Derek Carr in there, this could be a really fun offense. It's just not happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it, but yeah, you're right. And, another issue that I think is going to pop its head up this week is what happens when you're sitting here and TJ Watt is teeing off on your offensive line.
That's crazy.
Yeah, right. We haven't even talked about TJ Watt. He's just teeing off on this offensive line, and their only answer is going to be, hey, we have to chip with Brock Bowers every single play. And then what's going to happen? You're taking your top target off of, out of rhythm in your passing. And not to mention, who are you going to – Nick Herbig is over on the other side, and he's played fantastically since coming in for Alex Highsmith. So they don't really slow down. Actually, Nick Herbig might be on the injury report, actually, now that I think about it. I have to go double check. But
whoever
anyway,
the 4th-string guys there, I have full confidence.
I have full confidence they're going to be fine. But yeah, so that's just another thing that is going to probably end up being an issue for them. They just have to, Pittsburgh has to get the running game going a little bit, take a little bit of pressure off Justin Fields. I think they'll be better. And now I think we spent way too much time on a game that's going to be pretty ugly, but we make money off of some ugly games here, V. That's kind of our MO. The next game, another pretty hideous one. Actually, this could be an interesting one because it could have a bunch of points, but it's not really the flashiest or prettiest with how Carolina has kind of played. That's been a disappointing one for me. The momentum's kind of fallen off for them. But Atlanta heading into Carolina off some fresh rest. They are a 6-point favorite on the road. Game total for this one, 46.5, 47. You're liking the over here, V.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about why you're targeting the over at about, you have it at 47, but I'm sure that you jump on this 46 as it continues to move, whichever direction that would be. So what are you seeing with this one?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is the surprise game for the afternoon slate. Like, what is this one doing in the 3 o'clock window? Like, what is going on there? This should be, probably not even on TV at all on Sunday, but it's going to be. But yeah, I'm definitely liking the over in this game. Yeah, we can start with that. Atlanta's offense going up against this Carolina defense that is horrendous. They're allowing 33 points per game, the worst in the NFL. They are tied for the most touchdown passes allowed. Carolina only has 5 takeaways on the season. They have the lowest pressure percentage in the NFL, and they're tied for the second fewest sacks. They just don't do anything well whatsoever. Josie Jewell has been ruled out again, and Jadeveon Clowney is doubtful after getting an injury last week against Chicago. Atlanta's offense finally showed up last week. Kirk Cousins looked really good. 500 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. I don't think they're going to have any trouble continuing that in this game. Should be a nice offensive day for them. On the flip side, I think surprisingly, Atlanta's defense also not very good. They have a lot of similar stats to what Carolina is showing right now. They're every single week they're allowing more and more points. They've allowed 22 plus in each of their last 3 games. They're allowing the 4th most rushing yards per game, so it could be a nice Hubbard game in this one. They have the fewest sacks in the league and the 2nd lowest pressure percentage. So kind of flip-flop with Carolina, but both of them are in the bottom 2 in both pressure percentage and sacks. And Atlanta also only has 5 takeaways. So, neither defense is really doing anything. They're not pass rushing. They're not taking the ball away. They're not stopping opposing offenses whatsoever. Troy Anderson ruled out for Atlanta. He's been one of the more underrated linebackers so far this season. Had a pick 6 a couple of weeks ago against Derek Carr. So just not anything going on whatsoever for either defense. And I feel like a lot of people are really slowing down on Carolina's offense based on last week. But I think, again, that's just a really good Chicago defense. I think what they did against the Raiders and the Bengals in weeks 3 and 4, I wouldn't say it's indicative of what they're going to be all season, but it is something that I think can happen again, from time to time when they're playing some of these weaker defenses like Atlanta. So I think this is going to be a much better Carolina offensive day for them in week 6.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm right there with you. The big thing is Carolina's defense, man.
Terrible.
They have just been falling off a cliff. Lowest overall defensive grade from PFF for the entire defense, about 55. And they're really struggling on the pass rush. That's kind of the big glaring thing for me, is that they're really not pressuring anybody well. And when we just talk about trends for both of these teams, Atlanta, 2 straight overs after, their pretty impressive performance offensively last week. And like you said, they let up 30. Tampa didn't play a poor game against Atlanta. They put up 30, and they had a really, really close game against the Saints. Saints put up 24. So they're kind of trending in that direction where overs are definitely going to be in play for them more weeks than not. And then when you just look at Carolina, like we said, it's the defense that is pretty much the reason why they went over last week. Scoring 10 points. Chicago had 36. At this point, sometimes when we talk about overs, we talk about it takes 2 to tango. I don't even know if this was going to take 2 to tango. They could score, Atlanta could score 37 points. and put this one in to still into reach. So, but I do agree with you. I think that Carolina can get something going, particularly on the ground, where it seems like the only production they're getting consistently is off the ground game. And that was after, hey, their pass protection was really good for the first few weeks. It's still not bad, but they're just not hitting those balls with any frequency like they used to. They really need to get the ground game going again to get some production back. But I'm right there with you. I think over 47, over 46 and a half, depending on where you guys shop around, is definitely a good read for that. The last game we have on the list here is going to be a doozy. And I know we both like the same thing. We're liking a little bit of the game total and the spread here. The Lions -3, another road favorite heading into Dallas. Game total for this one, 52 and a half. Depending on where you're shopping. Let me actually first, before I let you, break it down with such eloquence, I'm going to break into some of the trends that we're seeing here. Detroit, obviously coming off of a bye week. They had their best game of the year in week 4 against Seattle. They're 3-1 against the spread so far. All as favorites, 1-0 against the spread as road favorites that came in week 3 at Arizona. Jared Goff, he had his excellent game week 4. 18 of 18, caught a touchdown. When they're clicking offensively, man, this team is a lot of fun to watch. I like when they're feeling themselves. And the big thing is that they just have to stay efficient on the ground with that duo. They're nasty with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They really get in there well. I think they had 3 ground touchdowns. I can't remember off the top of my head. Top 3 EPA per play on runs. So super impressive. When we talk about their defense, Aiden Hutchinson, odds-on favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year, around plus 300. You guys can go get on that one right now if you want. I was impressed to see it still at plus 300 because I feel like he's kind of run away with it. 15 pressures in their last game, 35.4 pass rush win rate in that game. That's just a microcosm of how good they are overall defensively. Their pass rush win rate as an entire defense is 66.5%. That's the best in the NFL. And Dallas, especially on the edges, that's an issue. Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele haven't really been great in pass pro. They've combined for 27 pressures, 7 sacks. So that's kind of a big crux for this one, which is why I'm leaning towards Detroit at -3 on the road. And we're also going to break into the game total, but I'll let you kind of break down why we're feeling the way we feel on that one. But what are you seeing in this game, partner?
Yeah, also liking Detroit -3 in this game. This Dallas offense is tough to watch. I know they pulled that one out last week at the last second, but man, they're just not really doing anything well whatsoever right now. They've scored 20 or fewer points in 3 games this year. They have the second fewest rushing yards per game in the NFL. They have the third most passing yards per game, but only 13 in yards per attempt. So they're throwing the ball a lot, which is what's leading to all these yardage marks, but they're not being very efficient with it. They're just relying too much on Dak in that passing game, despite some of the injuries that they're dealing with, whether it's Brandon Cooks or some of these other guys who aren't out on the field right now. So it's just a lot of Dak trying to find CD or Jake Ferguson or whoever it is, and it's asking way too much. They're just not built to do that right now. And then, this Detroit offense is still really good. They had a couple slip ups, I think, against Tampa Bay and Arizona, where their offense didn't look all that great, but bounced all the way back against Seattle. Passing game was on point, rushing game was on point, and this Dallas defense it's okay. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's bad. They had some nice outings, but those were against quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields. Like whenever they play somewhat competent quarterbacks like Derek Carr, who else did they play? They played somebody else. Lamar Jackson. Anytime they play against quarterbacks like that, they seem to be getting torched pretty easily. So, I don't think this Dallas defense can slow down this Detroit offense, and I don't think this Dallas offense can do all that much right now.
Yeah. And didn't Jerry say that they're saving Zeke? What did I
saw
read
that?
Did I have a fever?
What?
Did I have a fever dream when I read that? Like saving him for what, brother? You need yards right now. Your running game is not looking great, and I think that that's a big indication that they don't quite understand what their issues are right now at the top. And that's kind of frightening because, like you said, and like we've talked about a lot, they cannot continue to put all of this weight on Dak and CD and Ferguson. It's just not cohesive to offensive production when you become so one-sided that, like you said, you're at the top. Like, ESPN is probably going to run some graphic that says Dallas up there in passing yardage, but like you just said, none of it's efficient. It's not really coming. It's only coming due to volume and because
Yeah.
all they do is throw right now. Last week, they won off of a prayer, off of it. They could have just as easily lost that game, and I think we would have felt the same way. It was a
Yeah.
little bit of a fluky thing. I know that I actually looked up and was like, wait, they ended up winning? Like, what? And go back and watch the tape and be like, okay. So, still not super encouraged by that team, as Detroit is literally looking like they're coming off the best game of their season, going into a bye, and they're going to hit the ground freaking running through the back half of this year, or through the rest of this month at least. So I'm right there with you. I think we're both leaning on Detroit -3 and the under on this incredibly high number at 52.5. Oh, and you know what? We didn't even mention the added motivation of Detroit's heinous loss last year off the non-eligible penalty on the 2-point conversion. They say they're not thinking about it, and who am I to call them liars? But it's going to be in the back of their mind without a doubt. So that about does it, partner. I think that we broke it down pretty well. That's a pretty good slate. I'm excited to watch it unwind. And that about wraps us up for week 6. We are back same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern. Check us out, everybody. ImportantNonsense.com. Become a member. That's how you get into our Discord. You can ask us questions, see the rest of our bets for the week. We do more. We try to hit on the primetime games when we can. We answer questions when you guys got them. Try to give you some insight on your own bets and things like that, what we're thinking. So come in, talk to us. You can also hit up all the fantasy guys, bug them about your lineups and your start sits and your trades and things like that. So yeah, definitely hit us up. And yeah, I think that about does it. Partner, you got anything for the people at home?
Just like you said, make sure to hop into the Discord channel. Going to have a pick for Sunday night and Monday night in there for you guys. So come in there and take a look. But yeah, should be another great weekend of football. Looking forward to it. And yeah, we'll talk again next week.
Yep. Until next time, everybody. Good night. Good luck.